Rowan was used to struggling. Ever since his parents passed away in a tragic accident, he had been left to fend for himself on the harsh streets of Mumbai. A skinny, unnerved boy of 18, he spent his days searching for food and dodging trouble. His only possessions were the tattered clothes on his back and the memories of a life he had lost. The nights were the worst. Rowan often curled up in a hidden corner of the alleyways, hoping that the darkness would shield him from the dangers lurking in the city. But hunger gnawed at his insides, and the cold wind whispered cruel reminders of his loneliness. He had no home, no family, no future. One evening, after failing to find anything to eat, Rowan collapsed near a bustling hospital. His stomach growled painfully, and his vision blurred. The smell of antiseptic and medicine filled the air as nurses and doctors walked past him, ignoring the boy on the ground. Just when he thought he would pass out from hunger, a shadow loomed over him. "You look like you could use some help," a deep, smooth voice said. Rohan blinked up at the man, Dr. Vikram. Tall and impeccably dressed in a white coat, the doctor smiled down at him. But there was something unsettling about his eyes agleam that sent a shiver down Rowan's spine. "Come with me," Dr. Vikram said, extending his hand. "I can give you food, shelter, and a warm bed." Rohan hesitated. He had learned the hard way that kindness often came at a price. But his hunger was unbearable. If he stayed on the streets, he wouldn't last much longer. Slowly, he reached out and took the doctor's hand. Inside the hospital, Dr. Vikram led him through empty hallways, past locked doors and silent corridors. The warmth of the building comforted Rowan, and the thought of a meal made his mouth water. "You're lucky I found you," the doctor said, leading him into a dimly lit room. "So many kids like you disappear every day." Rohan gulped, unease creeping into his chest. Something about this place felt off. Dr. Vikram motioned toward a chair. "Sit. Let's get you cleaned up before we talk about your future." The words sent a chill through Rohan, but he obeyed. He was too weak to argue. As he settled into the chair, a strange dizziness overtook him. His vision blurred and his limbs felt heavy. "What's happening?" he slurred, struggling to keep his eyes open. Dr. Vikram leaned closer, his smile widening. "Don't worry, Rowan. Soon, you won't have to worry about anything ever again." The last thing Rowan saw before everything went black was the doctor's cold, calculating eyes watching him drift into unconsciousness. Rowan sat in the dimly lit room, his heart racing. The walls were painted in a sterile white, and the scent of antiseptic filled the air. His wrists were strapped to the chair, preventing any chance of escape. Dr. Vikram stood before him, a wicked smile playing on his lips. "Now, Rohan," the doctor said smoothly, adjusting his gloves. "You have two choices: comply or suffer the consequences." Rohan swallowed hard. He had no idea what Dr. Vikram had planned, but the sinister glint in his eyes sent a chill down his spine. A nurse entered, holding a tray filled with various items: wigs, makeup, and clothing. Rowan's eyes widened in horror. You can't be serious," he stammered. Dr. Vikram chuckled. "Oh, I'm very serious. You see, Rohan, I need a test subject. And you're perfect." Tears welled up in Rowan's eyes as the reality of the situation sank in. He was at the mercy of a madman. The nurse approached and began the transformation. First, she removed his ragged clothing, replacing them with a silky pink nightgown. The soft fabric against his skin made him shiver. "Perfect," Dr. Vikram murmured. "Now the makeup." The nurse applied foundation to his face, evening out his skin tone. A light blush dusted his cheeks, followed by eyeliner that made his eyes appear larger, more feminine. With each stroke of the brush, Rohan felt his identity slipping away. "Please, stop," he whispered, his voice trembling. Dr. Vikram leaned in, his expression unreadable. "Stop. Oh no, my dear. We've only just begun." A long curly wave was placed on Rohan's head. The strands cascaded down his shoulders, framing his face in an almost angelic way. The nurse stepped back, admiring her work. Dr. Vikram snapped his fingers, and another assistant brought in a mirror. Rohan hesitated, fear gripping his heart. Slowly, he turned his gaze to the reflection. A girl stared back at him. His breath hitched. The transformation was unreal. He looked nothing like the poor boy he once was. Dr. Vikram smirked. "Meet Riya. That's your new name." Rohan shook his head violently. "No, I'm not Riya. I'm Rohan." Dr. Vikram's expression darkened. "Rohan is gone. You are Riya now." A camera was suddenly brought into the room. The red recording light blinked ominously. "This is proof," Dr. Vikram said, motioning towards the camera. "If you ever try to escape, I'll make sure the world sees this." Rohan's body went cold. He was trapped. The doctor's evil plan had only just begun. The cold steel of the examination table pressed against Arav's skin as he sat motionless, staring at his reflection in the large mirror across the room. The silky gown wrapped around his body, having his frame in ways he had never imagined. Dr. Varma circled him like a predator, his gaze sharp and calculating. "Remarkable," the doctor murmured, adjusting his glasses. "You were born for this transformation." Arav shuddered, his fingers gripping the fabric of his gown. You can't make me do this forever. Someone will find out." Dr. Varma smirked. "Who, exactly? You have no family, no friends who care enough to check on you. And besides, don't forget your secret is in my hands." Arav's heart pounded. He had to find a way out. But how? The following days blurred together. Each morning, Arav awoke in a luxurious bedroom, dressed in feminine attire laid out for him. Every detail was meticulously arranged, the scent of perfume in the air, the soft touch of silk against his skin. But the illusion of comfort was just that, an illusion. Dr. Varma ensured his transformation was flawless. Makeup lessons, voice training, posture correction, everything was designed to mold him into the perfect woman. And then came the final step. Arav's pulse quickened as he was led into a lavish boutique. A personal stylist greeted him with a warm smile, oblivious to the turmoil within him. "We have the perfect collection for you, Ms. Arya," she chirped, using the name Dr. Varma had assigned him. "Your debut is just around the corner." Arav swallowed hard. His debut? Before he could protest, he was whisked into the fitting room. Dresses of every color and fabric lined the walls. The stylist selected a deep red gown, its sequined bodice shimmering under the light. "Try this one first," she said, placing it in his hands. Arav hesitated, then caught sight of Dr. Varma's knowing smirk in the mirror's reflection. His pulse pounded. Resistance was futile. Slowly, he stepped into the dress, feeling its tight embrace against his body. The stylist clapped in delight. "Perfection," she declared. "Now for the finishing touches." The next few hours were a blur: hair extensions, manicures, jewelry. When Arav finally looked at himself in the mirror, a stranger stared back. A stunning woman, elegant and poised. Arya. A sudden knock at the door made him flinch. Dr. Varma stepped in, his gaze approving. "It's time." Arav's stomach twisted. Time for what? As he was led down a grand hallway, dread settled deep in his bones. When the doors opened, he saw the cameras, the flashing lights. And then a voice announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, presenting the enchanting Arya." The crowd erupted in applause. Arav's breath hitched. His escape window was closing fast. Could he still find a way out, or was he truly trapped forever? Arav, now fully transformed into Arya, stood in front of the full-length mirror, unable to recognize himself. His heart pounded in his chest as he ran his fingers over his smooth skin, his long, flowing hair cascading down his back. The doctor had outdone himself. Every detail was perfected to make Arav indistinguishable from a young woman. The corset hugged his waist, and the floral dress he was made to wear swayed with his every movement. His feet, encased in delicate heels, ached slightly as he tried to balance. Dr. Verma stood behind him, a smirk playing on his lips. Beautiful, he mused, circling Arav like a predator eyeing his prey. Arya, my dear, today is your big day. Arav's stomach twisted with dread. What do you mean? He asked, his voice softer than before, the effects of the training evident in his speech. Dr. Verma's grin widened. You'll be introduced to society today. You're no longer a poor, helpless boy. You're Arya, a charming young lady with a promising future. No, Arav whispered, shaking his head. You can't do this to me. Dr. Verma leaned in close, his voice like silk. You forget, dear Arya, that I can, and I will, unless you want everyone to see those pictures and videos. Arav clenched his fists. He had tried to escape multiple times, but each attempt was met with failure. The guards were always one step ahead, and the punishment for defiance was brutal. His willpower was weakening, and he knew that Dr. Verma would not stop until he got what he wanted. Now, let's go. The guests are waiting. Arav was led down the long hallway, his heels clicking against the marble floor. With every step, his fate seemed more and more sealed. As they approached the grand ballroom, his heart pounded harder. What if someone recognized him? What if someone saw through the disguise? The doors swung open, and all eyes turned to him. Arya had arrived. The room was filled with elegantly dressed men and women, their laughter and conversation blending into an overwhelming symphony of high society. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the lavish setting. A live orchestra played soft music in the background, adding to the sophisticated atmosphere. Arav's breath hitched as he stepped forward, his movements hesitant yet graceful, exactly how he had been trained. Dr. Verma walked beside him, beaming like a proud father introducing his daughter to the elite. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Verma announced, placing a firm hand on Arav's back, it is my great pleasure to introduce Miss Arya. The crowd erupted into polite applause, and Arav felt their scrutinizing eyes scanning him from head to toe. He wanted to disappear, to run, to scream, but he knew that wasn't an option. Not yet. A tall man in a tailored suit approached with a warm smile. Dr. Verma, you never fail to surprise us. Your daughter is stunning. Arav swallowed hard and managed a soft thank you, his voice perfectly modulated to sound feminine. Would you care for a dance, Miss Arya? The man extended his hand. Arav's heart raced. A dance. He had never danced before, at least, not as a woman. He cast a desperate glance at Dr. Verma, who gave him a sharp nod. With no other choice, he placed his gloved hand in the man's and allowed himself to be led to the center of the ballroom. The orchestra struck up a new tune, and before Arav could protest, he was twirled into a slow waltz. The man's grip was firm yet gentle, guiding him effortlessly across the floor. Arav struggled to keep up, his steps shaky at first, but as the dance continued, muscle memory from his rigorous training took over. He moved with surprising elegance, his dress flowing around him like a dream. You dance beautifully, the man whispered, leaning in slightly. Arav forced a smile. You're very kind. But inside, he was screaming. As the dance ended and the applause filled the air, Arav felt his composure slipping. He needed to escape. He needed to find a way out before this nightmare became permanent. But how? Dr. Verma was always watching, always in control. The threat of blackmail loomed over his head like a storm cloud, ready to unleash destruction at the slightest defiance. But something inside Arav had changed. Maybe it was the months of torment, maybe it was the overwhelming suffocation of his false identity, or maybe it was the tiny ember of rebellion still burning within him. Whatever it was, he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't live like this anymore. He had to make his move. Tonight. To be continued.